Hey, it's your girl KV.
And Celine.
And we're back with another episode of the Hood Health Report. Oh, clap for us. Hype me up, gas me up.
Right.
So this episode will be about the proposed Cali reparations and what the task force wants to do with that. You want to get started on the first article?
Yeah, sure. So the first article is called California Reparations Amount, if any, left to politicians. And the economists estimate that they owe more than $800 billion for decades of over-policing, disproportionate incarceration, and housing discrimination to black people in the California state. The bill is set to be have a deadline for July 1st, and they're trying to see if the compensations will be awarded. If they are awarded, it would be $800 billion, which is 2.5 times California's $300 billion annual budget. Black residents may not receive cash payments anytime soon, if ever, because the state legislature and governor will ultimately decide whether the reparations are to be paid to those black people in California.
And this figure doesn't even include health disparities that have shortened the life average and the lifespan of black people overall. Yeah. So and also the property that have been unjustly taken by the government, as far as like how we talked about eminent domain and stuff, when they see, oh, we need this land to build up our power plants, so we're just going to take it from you and give you pennies from it, like we talked about in other episodes. And also it doesn't figure in the devaluation of black businesses that has occurred in California.
Yeah, so another thing is, when I think about it, I saw a quote that said, no amount of money could ever make this right. The evil of slavery and insulting, it would be insulting to suggest that like any amount of money would be awarded, or if it is awarded, that it would make, up for what has happened to people in California, or even past California, to state more clearly.
The grounds that they use to come up with this reparations proposal is the fact that white people benefited from free U.S. government land through the 1862 Homestead Act. Also, Japanese Americans incarcerated during World War II, as well as Jewish Holocaust victims, have received reparations. So under these guidelines, it would it would only be fair to give reparations to black Americans, but a lot of people are, basically it's too many black people to do this for, so they don't want to do it, as the opposition would say.
Yeah, so even to like piggyback off of that, they're saying that most people that are residents may not even meet the requirements. So they do have requirements on the monetary compensation. You must be descendants of an enslaved black or free person in the United States in California, and that would leave out all the black immigrants that came there. So because California wasn't originally a slave state, it already is going to make it a lot harder for black people to claim that they are owed those reparations.
And that's another reason why the opposition says that they shouldn't do it, because Cali wasn't a slave state. And so they feel like the taxpayers would be punished for events and things that occurred that predate them either living in California or actually being born. So that's the ground that they stand on why they feel people shouldn't get reparations. But some other proposals include paying incarcerated inmates market value for their labor, establishing free wellness centers and planting more trees in black areas, banning cash bails, and also adopting a K-12 Black Studies curriculum. So these are also non-monetary proposals that they are suggesting for reparations.
And I don't necessarily believe that those are reparations, but they're all great things that the community should already be doing. Like I don't think that should be counted as reparations. That's just
fair.
Yeah, like that's something that should be equality.
Like you should definitely pay inmates for their time that they're working in jail. You should definitely have wellness centers in these neighborhoods for underserved people. Like
planting trees.
Planting trees should
Yeah.
be a given.
Yeah.
Like if you're gonna plant trees so that you can have air.
Right.
You know, so.
And then also, they've already started in San Francisco with a recommended $5 million payout, and it would guarantee income to at least $97,000 in a personal debt forgiveness for qualifying individuals. So I think that's a good, starting point that San Francisco is doing.
California's Reparations Task Force could face uphill battle in legislature. So many residents claim that they would move out of Cali if Black people are to be given reparations because they don't want their tax dollars to go to this. So one argument is that the Cali, in early state government, they supported slavery even though it was technically not a slave state. Like they made it very easy for people to still kind of come and be on the slavery tip regardless. So in 1852, Cali had passed and enforced a fugitive slave law that was harsher than federal fugitive slave laws and made the state more hospitable to slavery than other states. So as far as the proposal goes, 77% of Black Americans are in support of reparations compared to 18% of white Americans. And even in the article, they had like some Black conservatives that had some strong opinions about why Black people did not deserve or shouldn't get reparations. So other things to think about.
Yeah, and again, to piggyback, they also said 3 in 10 U.S. adults say that descendants of people enslaved in the United States should be repaid in some way, such as with land or money. And I thought the number was really low, but then again, you're thinking about it, like, of course they're okay with reparations for other groups, but when it comes to Black people, it's always, it's always just a touchy or one of those things where they don't necessarily see the value in doing anything for that community or our community.
Well, it was all created to keep us down. So it's like now if they give us reparations, they're literally going against everything their forefathers taught them and have passed down. Because if Black people had an equal footing as white people did, the world would look a whole lot differently. Yeah. Government would look a whole lot differently. Just life as we know it would not be if Black people weren't, given scraps and forced into slavery and, just held down, purposely held down.
It would be nice to see, if we could ever see the world, at an actual equal footing for, Black people, because I do feel like the biggest thing is money, land, those things. We don't necessarily have the power and influence. So if we were given that opportunity, it would definitely showcase something different. So I would love to see it happen. We'll see how that goes. Another thing that I saw in the article was that a lot of opposers say that many ethnic groups have been discriminated against in California. So they're saying that Indians, Asians, Latinos, LGBTQ plus, if they open the door for African Americans to get reparations, they're saying then why can't all these other groups receive reparations too, like they want it to be quote unquote fair? And I feel like that just goes back to when they had the all Black lives and Black Lives Matter and then the All Lives Matter. It's one of those things is like if anytime Black people get anything or if we ask for anything, they're gonna bring everybody into it. When we're not saying that, we're just saying we would just want to be included from the jump.
It brings me back to the term people of color and how they try to group us all together when we shouldn't. Black people are our own, Hispanics are their own, Asians are their own. We don't have the same ideals for the most part.
Cultural
differences and just everything that was taken from us, other ethnicities didn't quite get it the same way. And if they did, as we see with Jewish Americans and things of that nature, they've already got their reparations. So you can't group everybody in together when an Asian can still walk into a bank and get a loan before a Black person.
I agree. And then there's 5 categories of harm that they're saying would be included in the reparations, and those deal with health, disproportionate mass incarceration, policing, housing discrimination, unjust property taken by the eminent domain, and devaluation of Black-owned businesses. Moving on to the next article, which was what the California Reparations Panel says and how likely its proposals are to go into effect. The reparations task recommended that the state make a formal apology for its role in perpetuating slavery and its racial discriminatory laws. They feel like this would be like, something that would make people feel better. I think more than an apology is needed, and they do go into like other things that, of course, they feel like needs to happen. But I do feel like an apology is something that, should be stated. But how much does an apology really do for all the years of things that Black people have been put through? And then also a group of scholars and lawmakers in California, they just voted in advance to plan to offer reparations to descendants of enslaved people in the state. The proposals related to the reparations should include, or they want it to include, they want to create a new agency to implement any reparations law stemming from the report, abolish the death penalty, which I thought was important,
right.
Pay fair market value to people who are in jail, which we already touched on a little bit, prevent private prisons from contracting with the state. I think that's a good one too. Make public colleges and universities in the state free for anybody eligible for reparations. That's a big one. Make Election Day a paid state holiday. Fund wellness centers for African American communities. Restore voting rights to people who are convicted of crimes. I think that's
a very
yes.
important
I agree with that. And adopt a universal health insurance system in the state. Those are some of the things that they are proposing as well.
So people fear that the prospect of a recession and Cali's looming budget deficit could dampen enthusiasm for reparations. But they also mentioned outside of Cali, some other places that have tried to, or actually enacted different laws to serve as reparations. You already mentioned what San Fran has been working on. And outside of California, Chicago's suburb of Evanston created a program offering $25,000 for home ownership or home repairs to eligible Black household that was selected via the lottery. So that's one thing, even though it's not widespread for everybody, it's just particular to one neighborhood, it's a step, and that could, broaden and get to all of Chicago and all of the United States, since we have actually seen it, come to fruition. And I guess people would definitely have a problem with it being a lottery system opposed to just being for everybody, but they could definitely, like I said, with the looming fear of the deficit that Cali already has, that would probably be a suggestion to start it off as a lottery system versus just everybody that's eligible, so that they don't just immediately go bankrupt or go into a recession through it, but something still needs to be done.
Yeah, I'm not opposed to the lottery ideal, because in a sense that still would be fair, because then everybody would have the opportunity. It would just be more so, this was how it was selected for that person.
And staggering them out as opposed to kind of giving everything
at
to
one
everybody at one time.
Yeah, that might be something they should really look into. So the reparations report that we were talking about is not a law, but rather a series of recommendations that now go to lawmakers for their consideration, and any reparation program will need to be enacted by the legislator and approved by the governor before they're able to even decide if they want to do lottery style or if they want to try to give it to everybody at one time.
Yeah, so I think the deadline for them is July 1st for them to kind of have all of their proposals together for them to present it in the meeting, to then see what the governor says and if he approves it or not.
Yep. So we're weeks away. By the time this airs, it'll probably have happened. So we'll definitely have the answer.
A little update on that.
Right. We'll have to update y'all. The next article is what you need to know about California's reparation efforts. This just basically gives us some like facts and stuff about, you
little
know,
background.
basically California and the efforts that have been being made. So I think it's important that you know the median wealth for the Black households in the United States, which is extremely low to me. And I just was like, in 2022, that is what it is compared to white people. So it's 24,000 compared to 188,000 for white households. That is a huge jump in numbers.
And this is according to the Federal Reserve. This isn't like, oh, a study said this. So that was very shocking. Like, I knew that there would be a huge gap because we know what regular pay wage gaps are when people are in the same job. But for it to be this drastic, 24,000 to 188,000, like, yes, please give us reparations.
Yeah.
Like, that is just insane and egregious.
Yeah, because if you think about it, sometimes 24,000, you can't even buy a new car with that. Like, and to think that that's somebody's annual median of wealth, yeah, that was just, it's heartbreaking. And another fact that I saw in that article was that a lifelong state resident who is 71 could be eligible for roughly 1.2 million in total compensation for housing discrimination, mass incarceration, additional harm outlined in the report. Those are just estimates. And back in 2020, the state was in a different financial position, whereas now that they're saying that there might be, you know, like we were talking about earlier, there might be thoughts of a recession and stuff like that. So they're saying that it might be like a 22 billion deficit if they...
Look at this already. So that was the part that surprised me. So it was saying that in 2020 the state had a surplus of money, and that's when this task force was formed. Like, well, if we got all this extra money sitting around, we need to be handing out reparations. And now, just 2 years later, there's a $22 billion deficit for the state. So it's like, it felt like y'all just went to go spend the money to say we don't have it to give to Black people. So that was the part that really made me want to look into the budget and what they spent this money on, and how in 2 years, from 2020 to 2022, you went from a surplus to a $22 billion deficit. It definitely feels like some tomfoolery. Like, let's just spend the money to say that we don't have it, and not just spend it, let's overspend to show them that we really, really don't have the money to hand out for reparations. So that was felt disrespectful. It felt like somebody playing in your face. I felt like California was definitely playing in people's face with that one. So the panel also considered reparations in the form of free tuition and housing grants as well.
How do you feel about housing grants?
I think housing grants would be a good start. I don't think they should end it there. But with housing grants, especially opening people up to different neighborhoods, because now what we see, if Black people have housing grants or something of the sorts, is to keep you in a destitute neighborhood, in a food desert, in a place that doesn't have sidewalks and wellness centers. So the housing grants need to be for the more affluent neighborhoods, so that people can have access to better schools for their kids, have access to nicer grocery stores and things of that nature. But with that housing grant, people would need better jobs. People would need to be paid equally, and not, 3 cents on the dollar or whatever it is that Black people get according to what white people get. So housing grants and tuition could be a good start, especially tuition, because it would give more Black people a chance to go to school and get an education so that they can, get these better jobs, get this better housing availability, and not just have to pick ourselves up from our bootstraps like they've expected us to do all these years. So, how do you feel about the housing grants?
I kind of agree with what you're saying. I just feel like at the end of the day, having money or having access to money is going to always be better than a grant or tuition, just because that's what our community needs. There's obviously a big wage gap or difference in the medians of money being made in Black communities. So let's say they give you a housing grant, but then you get the house and you can't afford to pay like your utilities
exactly.
and stuff like that.
The taxes on the
yeah,
house.
so then you're back at square one. So it's like along with those grants or along with the tuition, there has to be something else that they're adding to the experience. Like, so if you go get a tuition, maybe like some kind of program where your first year out of college, you get into another an opening job or something where they're making some kind of living wage. I think that would be more helpful than just saying, hey, we're going to give you tuition or we're going to give you a housing grant.
Right, like a college to career pipeline.
Yeah, something like that.
They got all these pipelines from school to prison. They do need to have a pipeline of, okay, now that you've graduated college, you're not just sitting there with your degree hoping to get hired in these more affluent or white spaces. Like, no, there's already something set up for you to be in those spaces and for you to get those jobs and those opportunities. So,
or if you even are, if you are offered the opportunity to have a job, making enough money to be able to support yourself. That's what it all comes back to. You got to be able to support yourself on whatever the amount of money that they're giving you.
Exactly. So if you do get a housing grant to be in these affluent neighborhoods, you would still need money to afford whatever grocery stores are there or afford whatever services are there, so that you're not just house rich but poor.
Yeah. I sometimes think that the way they're looking at it is like band-aiding the situation instead of like actually figuring out the way to help the problem. A lot of it's just like putting band-aids over it, saying, oh, well, we gave them a housing grant or we paid for tuition. It's so much more that goes into, helping build a Black community or building any community. So.
I think that's all I got on that article. So the last article, Reparations Task Force votes to approve recommendation for the payments of reparations to Black Californians. In this article, they propose that some other recommendations include updating language in the state's constitution to remove racial bias and discriminatory practices in standardized testing. And we talked about that in the first season with the discriminatory practices in standardized testing. A lot of underserved communities, people coming out of those Black communities, are not able to get the study tools and get the prep that they need for these standardized tests, or even have access to afford the standardized tests, because they can get pretty pricey. So that would also be something that would help in that college to career pipeline. But like we said, it would need to be a lot more than just that.
This article also mentions that on June 29th, that they're going to have their next meeting, and they're going to discuss any final changes before presenting their proposal to the legislature on July 1st. So that should give us a little bit, more of an understanding about what exactly they are going to be asking, the state for when it comes to their proposal and stuff of that nature.
So that concludes this episode for today. I feel like we're going to have some updates to tag on to the end of this episode in a couple of weeks after they meet and propose everything to the governor and see exactly what the outcome will be. But in the meantime, make sure you follow our show pages, Hood Health Pod on Twitter, Hood Health Report on Facebook and Instagram and TikTok. Yep.
That's all of That's all of
If you want to see our beautiful faces, subscribe to the YouTube, KVENT. We'll put it on the screen somewhere with the playlist Hood Health Report. And that concludes this episode.
See y'all.
Bye.